Good evening. I'd like to call the October 12th regular board meeting to order. Mrs. Hutchinson, will you please call the roll?
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here. Mrs. Kolovitz, will you lead us in the pledge?
Yes.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are so excited to be here at Jefferson tonight, our first opportunity to hold a board meeting. Thank you. At the school. So thank you, Jefferson staff, for hosting us tonight, and Dr. Mary Davis, if you'd like to join us up here.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Jefferson. We are equally as excited to host you here as well. My name is Dr. Mary Davis, but around here they call me Principal Mary, or sometimes when our little 3-year-olds R's haven't come through, sometimes it sounds a little bit more like Principal Mary, which is my new favorite title. If it's your first time here at Jefferson, whether you're a board member or a community member, I really just want to welcome you here to my new home, and a home I just absolutely love. From top to bottom, this building was built with little people in mind, and I can't tell you how much of a difference it makes when the facility has been designed for your work. I see it day in and day out, and I get to hear it from the staff, and the students are loving their new building as well. So, as a previous teacher at the old building, and a parent of a child who went to the old building and the new building, and now the principal at the new building, I just cannot say thank you enough to those who came before me and all of you guys who saw this effort through. So thank you again for building this, like the most beautiful building in the entire world for us here at Jefferson. While I have you here, though, I do want to highlight some fun stuff going on here at Jefferson. But before I do, I just want to take an opportunity to acknowledge the loss we had here at Jefferson. Just a couple weeks ago, we did lose a young man. His name was Elliot. He was just a little guy, and he only got to attend with us for a little bit of time. But we always say here, once you're a Jet, you're always a Jet. And so we've appreciated the support from the district and our fellow staff members at different schools and the community, and just pouring your love into us, and we just really appreciate it. So while I had you here, I just thought if you wouldn't mind keeping him and his family and the staff who worked with him in your thoughts and prayers, we would really, really appreciate it as we continue to mourn the loss of one of our littlest learners. Which is actually a really good segue. I was trying to think, what should I present here? Like last month you had a marching band present. Like, I don't have a marching band. And I'm kind of new around here too. So I just thought I would share with you some of the lessons I've learned since coming to Jefferson. And so far, the first lesson I want to say is that my staff is amazing. Not all of them could come tonight, but several of them did. So I'm going to encourage them to stand up so you can see who are the magic makers here at Jefferson. So if you're a Jefferson staff member, if you don't mind standing up. These people make incredible things happen day in and day out. And one of the best parts of my job is I get to watch that happen here. One of the biggest things I got to see as I transitioned here is like those first few days of school when parents are really anxious about sending their babies. I mean, they're babies. They're like 3 years old. They've been in this world for 3 whole years to school. And these guys, they just take them in like they're their own children. They walk slowly, they hold their hands, they rub their back if they're crying. They do all of those types of things. And from day one to day whatever we're on, they slowly and incrementally start to work with them and encourage them to learn and grow. They make learning fun. They make work fun, right? Because that's our work here is doing all that learning. They have the patience of saints and hearts of gold. It is absolutely an honor and a privilege to work with these guys and have them serving our community's youngest learners. My other lesson I've learned is I have the cutest students in the entire district. And I say that every single time I possibly can because it is so true. And we do have a few of them here tonight. In addition to these cute little guys that I get to spend my days with, their parents are also really supportive. I have several members of my PTA here tonight, so I'd really like them to also stand up and be acknowledged because they're the ones who brought in the treats. They're the ones who've gotten volunteers in our buildings. They're the ones who organized this whole awesome festival we have going on. So if you're a member of the PTA, please stand up. We are so grateful for you. And together, right, our mission is to meet all children where they're at and continue to help them learn and grow. So as I've been here and I've spent more time in classrooms, I've seen a whole lot of things, which I'm going to list off here. I've seen students learning school rules and routines and how to be a good friend. They've been experimenting and imitating through imaginative play centers and music. They are exploring early literacy and numeracy concepts in both small and large group. They're strengthening their muscles and coordination during gross motor times, and they are working on meeting their therapeutic goals in the areas of social communication and fine and gross motor development. They are busy little friends in their 2.5 hours with us. So we try to combine all of those things and maximize their learning. But they did have time to do one special art project, so I'm going to actually ask my little friends to come on up here and help me. What we have for you is all 281 students, all painted a handprint. They traced their hand and they painted their handprint, and we turned them into flowers and bunched them together. So each of you are going to get something that says, "A handmade bouquet was created for you by the littlest hands in District 200. So if you guys could come on up, grab a bouquet, and then find a person who doesn't have one and bring one to them. Find someone who doesn't have one and go bring it to them and say thank you. Okay, now go find someone who doesn't have one.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good job. Do another one. I've got more, guys.
So darn cute. Oh my gosh,
You're popular, just like
Did you find somebody? Oh, thank you. All right, friends, thank you so much. It is dangerously close to our little friend's bedtime, so I think we're going to make a swift exit, but we really appreciate you guys coming tonight, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jefferson students and staff, for this. I still have a tree on my refrigerator of all the students' fingerprints that they made one time, and this will find a special place in my home as well. Board members, are there any modifications to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Board president report. I just have a few things. I'm not sure if you all received an email that the IASB Executive Director Tom Bertrand will be stepping down at the end of the year. Tom has really been, in my last year and a half, extremely helpful for the large unit school districts. He has met with us multiple times, has always been very accessible, and was really a leader in some of the changes that happened this year in terms of resolutions and majorities and votes. And so they will be looking to get some feedback and appoint someone in the spring to fill his role. Two other things I just have are building visits, and if any board members have gone since our last meeting to a building and would like to share. The day after our last board meeting, I had the opportunity to go to Johnson, which is just such a wonderful place to go and visit, and was hopping with excitement. I love our new playground that's there. I had first graders reading poems to us, to Dr. Edwards and myself. One teacher I do want to highlight, and I did mention to Erica, he started in the district the same year I started, about 30 years ago. And talk about a legacy within his classroom. I'm looking at the ceiling because that's what I'm going to talk about. He has taken students' art projects for his entire career at Stad Boss, and the whole ceiling is just this almost like a timeline of his projects that he has done with students on books. And it is just an amazing thing to see. I think you'd be a great person to highlight sometime for the community to see that. He's actually moving stuff out into the hallway because he's run out of space. But it's really, as he was talking to me, and he's talking about a student here who did this one, and it was a great tribute to his 30 years of teaching. Today, I had such a great opportunity. Wheaton North is one of my adopted schools, and I had told Mr. Biskin I would like to see the Teaching 1 class that we had, the dual credit class that we had agreed upon this last year. And he asked if I would talk to the students, because today was about curriculum and assessment. The kids wanted to know about that. I have experience in that. And then they also wanted to know about the role of a board member and how do we play a part in some of the decisions that are made. So I am never at a loss for words. And so we spent the entire time. They had questions. I was blown away that I was talking to high schoolers. I was really thinking I was talking to later college students who have had the experience. They take their role very seriously. They're having fun. It was great. I loved it. I was so impressed with the questions that were asked by them. I can't wait to go back. I'd even love to come and see them in the schools that they're at. So shout out to them. It was very, very impressive, and the two staff members that are teaching that as well. So that's all I have. We will move on to public comment. Let's see. Okay, we will not need to shorten. We have, I believe, 8 people speaking tonight. In accordance with Board Policy 2.230, members of the public wishing to offer public comment have the opportunity to do so. A public comment sign-up sheet was made available until 7 p.m. here. Board meetings are available for viewing via the live stream on the district's YouTube channel. As with all comments, please be aware that it's the board's regular practice to not directly discuss, ask questions, or take action on public comments until the time has been taken to gather adequate information. The board is here to listen. Lack of action or direct response following public comments does not imply any lack of interest in what is being shared. Per Board Policy 2.230, the time allotted for each person to speak may be shortened. We will not be shortening that tonight. To preserve confidentiality, the board and its president request that items relating to either personnel or students be provided to the board privately or in writing for consideration in a future closed session if necessary. The board must protect the civility and decorum of the meeting. Please be respectful for the duties of the board, our district leadership team, and the democratic process in your public comment. Please include your name, whether you are a resident of the district. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. We do not have our timing system here tonight, so Mr. Hanlon will be timing and raise his hand as the 3 minutes wraps up. Please be factual, courteous, and do not include statements that are personally disrespectful or condescending to members of the board and staff. The first person up is Miss Mary Ann Vitone.
Listed on tonight's action items are number 2, release a portion of the closed meeting minutes, and number 3, release a portion of the verbatim recording from the July 13th illegal closed session. I filed an Open Meeting Act violation against District 200 with the Illinois Attorney General. The Illinois Attorney General determined that CUSD200 violated the Open Meetings Act. Mr. Jones' letter stated, contrary to the board's response, the discussion concerned a book, not an employee. The board spent more than 40 minutes deliberating the contents of the book, whether to retain it in our libraries, and then discuss the logistics of voting in open session. The Attorney General says to remedy the violation, he's requesting the board to release to me and make public the meeting minutes and closed session verbatim recording. Why is the board voting to release a portion of both? You participated in an illegal private meeting that should have been public, and I guess you think you only have to release a portion. This is not my first go-around with District 200. This district has violated the Open Meetings Act 2 times, FOIA once, all ones I filed with the Illinois Attorney General. They got sued for trying to build a school without going to referendum, and decades ago lost a Supreme case over a superintendent contract. Violation of the Open Meeting Act is a Class C misdemeanor, punishable by up to 30 days in jail and a $1,000 fine. Do you think you're above the law? Board members are public servants. You are to serve and answer the people, not the administration. How many times do you think you should be allowed to violate the law with no consequences? Maybe if some or all of you need to sit in jail and pay a fine out of your own pocket, maybe that's what is needed. And that's what it's going to take for you to comply with the laws you are to follow. But your abandon of the law and your defiance to think you can do whatever you want to cover unlawful behavior and have the taxpayers pay your legal bills is unacceptable. I am requesting that you comply with the recommendation and release the entire audio and meeting minutes from your unlawful meeting to me and make them publicly available. From a board that claims to be open and transparent, you have lost any trust if you ever had much to begin with. Will this board do the right thing? Now is your opportunity. We are watching and waiting.
Next up is Eloise Volker. Oh, okay, that's fine. Patty Cross.
Hi, my name is Patty Cross. I have 2 kids in the district at South, and I live in Wheaton. Tonight I wanted to talk about, she did a better job than I'm going to do, but the violation of the Open Meetings Act. I found out about that recently. I was at the July board meeting. Angela tried to get the discussion out in the open. No one else would go along with it. Other community members tried to get you guys to go along with it. Nobody else would, and you now have an issue. So I encourage you to do the right thing so it doesn't escalate further. It would be a real embarrassment to the community to have a criminal case brought against the school board. The other issue I wanted to bring up is professionalism in the school board. There were 2 school board members that tried to stop a community member who spoke up at an August board meeting from a position within our community, and used their position to try to do that and got chastised by the mayor for it. Did not even go to the Wheaton meeting to publicly do it. You tried to do it in a backhanded way, and the letters that were written to try to stop Dave Somner's appointment showed quite the disdain for people who disagree with you publicly And for people who didn't want our kids in masks, and we're still obviously having an issue with that. That's really disheartening. And especially when, regarding genderqueer, the board is saying how we have to bring the community together, but yet you're doing the opposite behind the scenes. So I encourage you to practice what you preach. Thank you.
Next up is James Rexillius. Okay. Harold Lonks.
Good evening. I'm here to make a few comments in regard to the Open Meetings Act violation. The Illinois Attorney General determined that you violated the Illinois law by discussing a library book, genderqueer, in a closed session and not in public as required by law. On page 3 of the AG letter, the Attorney General stated that no portion of the closed meetings was exempt from the Open Meeting Act. On page 4 of the AG letter, the remedy is to release the recording and the minutes of the closed session to Ms. Fatone and the public. However, in tonight's agenda, under action items, it only states a portion of the legal meeting will be released to the public. Why? What is the board administration hiding from the public? Why is the board administration not following the remedy of the Attorney General? I'm asking for board members to make a motion to amend the action item to approve release of the entire July 13 closed meeting minutes and recordings. Now I'm going to say this is your board vision statement. Our vision is to be an excellent and student-focused school district that is highly regarded for the competence and character of our students and the excellence of our people, program, and learning environment. And then underneath there, you have your belief statements. Under number 10, successful schools results when a partnership exists between schools, parents, and community. How does violating Illinois law and not following the remedy fit into the vision statements in providing excellency? Not releasing the entire closed session information does not partner a successful partnership between the school and the community in the belief statement I just read. Also, starting in August, additional verbiage was added to the Board of Education meeting notice. The notice states that please review Policy Board 8.30 prior to attending the meeting. I guess board members and administrators are exempt from the policy. Section 30 states that no person on or at a school event or on school property shall perform any of the following acts. Under number 6, violate any Illinois law or town or county ordinance. Not only have you violated the open meeting law, you also violated your own board policy 8.3. Again, the board needs to fix this issue by amending the action item. Release the entire recording and meeting minutes. Thank you.
Next up is Rachel Hennigan.
Hi, my name is Rachel Hennigan, and I have two in the district now. And I also have ADHD and severe social anxiety, so I would not be here if I didn't believe in this issue. If you've never heard of invisible disabilities, most parents don't look for delays in their children. Most parents deny seeing it until the delays are obvious in academic work. I've been the victim of the wait-and-see approach, and if it weren't for my son's deafness, they would be much further behind based on District 200's current preschool and kindergarten half-day policies. Autism, deafness, ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and dyscalculia are some of the invisible disabilities that our family deals with on a daily basis. As a public school system, it is your responsibility to uphold the child find laws of Illinois. How can you honestly say that you've tried to find, locate, and identify when you restrict all-day kindergarten to those who can afford it, not those who need it? Offering all-day instructional kindergarten is not enough, as these kids with invisible disabilities often don't qualify or aren't identified yet. How many more kids do you think District 200 could identify if you added full days to preschool and/or kindergarten? My deaf autistic sons were further ahead at age 4 than my daughter is because they qualified for a special program that offers all-day preschool and all-day kindergarten. Imagine not having to send many kids out of district because you can in fact offer all-day kindergarten with services. Or what about that child that's high functioning, but it doesn't become a problem until they enter 3rd grade? but haven't been identified and could have been supported a year and a half earlier and had that extra social support in full-day preschool or kindergarten. At present time, District 200 prioritizes profiting off of all-day kindergarten instead of what's best for the children in their care. I'm sure I'm not the only parent who has looked into moving into a house in a school district that offers full-day kindergarten at a reasonable price, and $3,600 is not reasonable. I'd be willing to bet that many of the taxpayers in your district have no idea that you guys charge that much and or don't offer it for free or a reasonable price. Most districts only charge fees between $30 and $200 for all-day kindergarten. That's the entire year, and that's a one-time payment. Taxpayers. Back in 2018, the board asked you for a new early childhood center, which you approved without raising your property taxes. When my sons were diagnosed with autism in 2021, they actually needed more services. I can see it costing you more in the long run. Behaviors are more difficult to fix the older the child gets. More time in the classroom equals more time under trained eyes, equals more child identified earlier, equals interventions in place earlier. If 80% of Jefferson students go into mainstream kindergarten like they claim, is that 80% of all the students, or is it just the neurotypical ones? Because I'd be willing to bet that the 20% is the students with IEPs. I'd also bet that you could close that gap by offering full-day preschool. Wouldn't it make more sense to have full-day kindergarten in order to adequately provide services without cutting academic instruction? I emailed a letter to this board in August and it was dismissed. So now I'm here in person imploring taxpayers and District 200 parents to question this board as to why Naperville Districts 203 and 204 can offer all-day kindergarten and our district would rather profit off of it.
Thank you, Ms. Hennigan. Next up is Jessica Hawkett.
Hi, I'm Jessica Hawkett. I have a sixth grader at Franklin. So before July 2022, I would have assumed that it wouldn't be possible for, or that you would do everything in your power to make sure that no child, no teen, no minor could access images of sexual acts in school. And by a sexual act, I mean a sexual act between a man and a man and a woman, a man and multiple women, a man and himself, a woman and herself, right? People and animals, okay? I could go down. That is an unambiguous term, image of sexual act. With genderqueer, it's not about what the subject matter is. It's not about whether it can purportedly save a life. That's not it. You have to apply an unambiguous criterion of it has images of sexual acts. End of story. Images that, doesn't matter if they're drawn, if they're photographed, or if they're in mosaic or oil painting. Doesn't matter if they're accessed in like physically or digitally. My assumption as a taxpayer is that my child, whether she's in elementary school, middle school, and high school, will not be able to access those kinds of images through or in school. That's a reasonable expectation. The only possible exception would be a highly technical, sanitized, completely unarousing picture in a health textbook. That's the exception. Release the full recording. I have a feeling, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I have a feeling that it says partial recording because there maybe were times when you were discussing personnel in a way that you wouldn't want released, and that you assumed that when discussing maybe the librarians or the teachers that brought the complaint, that they wouldn't hear it. So I could understand that, benefit of the doubt there. But otherwise, you need to release the full recording so that I can hear what your definition of pornography is, so that I can hear if we have a shared understanding of what children should be seeing in school and what you should be giving them access to. Thank you very much.
Next up is Nathan Mead.
Everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Hey, I want to start tonight by reading a couple letters. So let's start off here from September 19th. As a Wheaton resident, I ask that you reconsider the recommendation to appoint Dave Somner to the Community Relations Commission. I widely applaud residents who are willing to get involved, but based on legal action, David Somner has taken against CUSD200, as well as recent public condescending attacks towards school board members and teachers, I don't feel that Mr. Somner's actions would align with the stated purpose of the commission. I feel that approving this appointment would be inconsistent with that idea. Collectively, we need to work collaboratively and respectfully to close the hatred and divide that is a cancer in American society today, and it is certainly being felt here in Wheaton. Second letter. I'm writing today solely as a community member of Wheaton. I saw on your agenda for Monday, September 19th, that there is a recommendation to appoint David Somner to a 3-year term to the Community Relations Commission. I want to express my deep concern for this particular appointment, as Mr. Somner has demonstrated on several occasions that he's not fit to preside on the Community Relations Commission in particular. First, he was a named plaintiff in a massive lawsuit filed against CUSD200 earlier this year. He took valuable time and resources away from our school district over issues that were completely out of the district's control and created circumstances that only further divided our community. In addition, Mr. Somner was recently delivered a public comment at August 24th Board of Education meeting that outwardly mocked and ridiculed both the Board of Education and the CUSD administration. Well, I want to provide some context. The Tom DeVore lawsuit was filed October 21st, not earlier this year, and was a complete success. Our kids no longer are masked. Our kids can learn speech and phonics now in a clear manner. Imagine how much worse the Wall Street Journal article from October 4th, 2022, entitled Illinois' Shocking Report Card, The Land of Lincoln is Failing Its Children and Covering It Up. Would our kids still be in masks? And number two, the August 24th board meeting, 15 parents spoke out against the pornographic novel Genderqueer, and Mr. Somner was one of those parents. Well, 2 board members decided to write letters that I just read in retaliation for Mr. Somner speaking at this very microphone. It's concerning that these board members took this route and looked for an opportunity to try to slander a parent. The good news is Mr. Somner was appointed to the Community Relations Commission. Now listen, we don't have to be adversarial. We may not agree on every issue, but that does not mean we need to be enemies. It doesn't. Look, to that end, on July 13th, the board meeting, when the board violated the Open Meetings Act, Ms. Blattner mentioned that there were many great resources to support the
Thank you,
LGBT.
Mr. Mead.
Can I have her time that she didn't? Well,
Thank you.
anyways, look at those resources that Ms. Blattner put together.
Okay, next is Dr. Schuler, Superintendent Report.
Thank you, Mrs. Crabtree. Just a couple things I want to share with the board under my report tonight. Number one, huge thank you to the Jefferson staff and certainly Jefferson students for the kind welcome this evening. I do want to add to what Dr. Davis said, which is any time that we lose a student, it's a loss to the entire school district and community, and that is sad, no matter the age of the student, but certainly in this case, to lose such a young student was certainly a loss to the school district. And so I want to add my condolences and my thoughts that we keep Jefferson certainly in our thoughts and prayers. I had an opportunity just a little over a week ago to spend half a day here at Jefferson, and again, I think what Dr. Davis mentioned tonight, I saw firsthand in the work that's taking place. Also had a chance last week to visit Wheaton, Warrenville South, spend some time both in their classrooms with some of their student advisories. Had a chance to visit Johnson today for half a day. And have, again, just continued with some really impressive visits and opportunity to see a lot of math classrooms, especially at the elementary level, see the new curriculum adoption and implementation, and very, very appreciative for those efforts. We started this week some of our Vision 2026 kind of state of the schools events, had a chance to visit with Rotary. We've got a visit to an AM Rotary coming up, a local elected official opportunity, and are making sure that we have an opportunity to articulate the key work that is in front of the board. And then I want to end report this evening by just recognizing the fact that October is Principal Appreciation Month. You heard from Dr. Davis today, but we've got 20 very talented principals and a lot more assistant principals and administrators in the district that I'm thankful for and want to recognize their work as we celebrate Principal Appreciation Month.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. Next is the consent agenda. Acceptance of gifts to Monroe Middle School. Acceptance of gift to Wheaton North High School football program. Acceptance of gifts from Wheaton Warrenville South High School Tiger Paws. Approval of professional learning expenditure request for board meetings. Approval of illustrative math student workbooks. Approval of bills payable and payroll. Approval of minutes September 14th, 2022 open, September 28th, 2022 Committee of the Whole open, and approval to destroy recordings of closed sessions prior to May 2021 is allowable by law. Approval of personnel report to include employment, resignation, retirement, and leave of absence of administrative, certified, classified, and non-union staff. Are there any items board members want removed from the consent agenda? Okay, Dr. Schuler, any other information you'd like to provide?
No additional information other than thank you certainly for the 3 generous gifts that are highlighted. And then I just want to point out under number 5 that as we adopted the new math materials this year, one of the things that a committee of teachers have evaluated is a set of workbooks that supplement the program. We started with doing the printing in our own print shop. But we're making this purchase to really pilot the workbooks that come with the program for the balance of the year to evaluate if that is an expenditure that we want to continue moving forward.
Board members, any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, I ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Moved by Mrs. Booten,
Second.
second by Mrs. Blattner. Mrs. Hutchinson, will you please call the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. Next on to action items, approval of the 2022-2023 Citizens Advisor Committee roster. Dr. Schuler?
Yeah, so most of the background for this topic was actually included with the agenda item. The board recently approved a revised set of bylaws. Following the approval of those bylaws, we went back with our subcommittee and finalized the work and recommending a roster for this year. The proposed roster is in front of you. I do think through the recommendations we were able to address any of the applicants that came from schools not currently represented on CAC, and so I'm proud of that opportunity and certainly recommend tonight that you approve the roster so that we can invite the new committee members to join us a week from tonight for our second meeting.
Board members, any questions or comments? Okay.
Data that I've put together. Is this on? Yeah, okay. I think most of you know I've had many concerns about the CAC for many months now. It's not about ideology. It's not about agreeing or disagreeing. It's about basic human decency. Just baseline. How do you treat another human being? This is a committee that informs the Board of Education for a school district that teaches children from the ages of 3 to 18. I don't think basic human decency should be an unreasonable expectation for adults on this committee because it is certainly expected from our students in our schools. I heard a saying recently on a TV show. It was, don't be judgmental, be curious. This is the goal and bar I set for the CAC going forward. The leadership and certain members of the CAC have purposely put us, the board, on emails that show tremendous amounts of judgment, disdain, and disrespect for the administration, our staff, and the board. We have watched members of the CAC get up at public comment and disparage our students and their work based on race and for simply being who they are. This is completely unacceptable behavior from members of this committee. Do not misinterpret my words. Ask questions and provide feedback of all kinds to your heart's content. but do it with curiosity, with respect for not only our staff, but more importantly for our students, and lead with kindness. As long as I have this seat and this microphone, I will continue to speak out about the need for return to basic human decency. The CAC plays an important role in our board work. I expect better than what I have seen, and I urge the members of the CAC to be curious when choosing your leadership. Now, with that said, I do appreciate that the committee has spent a lot of time looking at this. I looked at this just from a data perspective on numbers. I made a spreadsheet of obviously all of our schools. Just coincidentally, Dr. Schuler had sent us an enrollment report. So they were to look at enrollment numbers, the number of current CAC members, and then what schools are being appointed to the new CAC. And then also I looked at by school sort of what the spread was of the current CAC members, when they came on, when they're rolling off, that kind of thing. And again, looking at how people were appointed, looking at both elementary district and middle school district. So a few things. So I do appreciate that that the subcommittee is appointing someone. We didn't have any applications from Madison, so outside of Madison, that they are appointing someone to the schools that had zero representation on the CAC from elementary, so I do appreciate that. But what I did notice is that last year, 10 of the new people who were appointed came from 3 schools. Last year, 3 people were appointed from Wiesbach. 4 were appointed who were from Pleasant Hill, and 3 were appointed from Longfellow. Now, I want to own something here. So last year when we approved the list of new CAC members coming on, if you remember, it was at our July 2021 meeting. Now, if y'all remember, July 2021 meeting was really difficult. we were discussing some very intense COVID issues and things like that. And I totally own that. That was also the first year the CAC had a subcommittee on choosing new members, because we had not had, until that point, we had never had enough applications to even have to do this. So from my experience on CAC, which was run well and had good leadership, and it wasn't, much of an issue. It wasn't an issue when I was on there, that I didn't put a ton of thought and look into that list at that time. So I own that error. I fully own that. That I didn't look at it as closely as I did this year. But the best we can do, or the best I can do at this point, is try to correct it going forward. And so, going back to what I was saying about the 10 people who were appointed last year from these 3 different schools, I just don't understand. We're appointing another person again from those same 3 schools, from Longfellow, from Pleasant Hill, and from Wiesbach. And the fact that we had, was it 28 or 30 applications that came in, that it just seemed odd to me that we're appointing people from those 3 schools again when we have very good representation from that. And then looking at something like Sandburg, that currently we have 2 representatives from Sandburg, both of those people are rolling off at the end of this year. So it seems that someone from Sandburg should have been appointed. We have a very low representation from the Edison Middle School District. Again, I know we didn't have anybody from Madison, but we're not appointing anybody from Lincoln, and we're only appointing 1 person from Whittier. And there are several members who are the same, I believe, as last year, who are on that subcommittee, who are on this one, and there were no issues with appointing 4 people from Pleasant Hill, 3 people from Wiesbach, and 3 people from Longfellow last year. So they've shown that they're okay with that, that we can appoint multiple people if we need to build that representation in that area. So I just feel like those factors need to be considered in when looking at who we appoint to the CAC to try to correct the balance that's on there. That's going to take a couple of years, I think, to do. But I also think that it needs to be looked at who is representing them from those schools, when are they rolling off, and like I had a couple, like when I was just making my notes, like Bauer and Hawthorne. You know, I had notes in there that someone should next year we should, if there's applications, you know, and that someone should be appointed from those schools because of the way people are rolling off. So I appreciate the effort, but I just feel like with a number of applications that we have received for this committee and trying to really make sure we have a representation of everyone in our district, that we could have had these numbers play out a little bit differently.
Other questions or comments from board members?
I have a question. I know in the bylaws we did make the amendment to have more school representation, and I think that's important that we represent the whole district. We want people of different experiences in our different buildings to be represented on the CAC. And also we talk about how 70% of the district doesn't have children in the school, and we want that perspective as well. So I appreciate that the CAC tried to recruit from the schools that were underrepresented, and there still are some that are underrepresented, some that will rotate off, and then, you know, Madison wasn't represented at all. What are we doing to make sure that people from those schools are recruited? Is there going to be targeted emails? Are we reaching out to principals, PTA?
Yeah, so when we adjusted the bylaws, we did put some language in the bylaws to indicate that we would use the resources through our communications department to support that outreach. So I think that involves both making sure that we communicate through principals, that as the application process comes out next year, that we are very targeted in sharing that with the communities that do not have as much representation, so they have every opportunity to share. Working with PTA Council, we had a meeting with PTA Council this morning, and I think there's another good resource to continue to advertise it. So I would anticipate we'll use every available resource through our communications department as we push that out next year.
I also think to have that different representation from our different buildings, that if the subcommittee was new, because this was the first year where we've had more candidates than otherwise, maybe we can also think about including some of the underrepresented schools in that subcommittee and any other subcommittees from the CAC, so that we, I think that could be a helpful recruiting tool.
Other questions or comments?
Just a short kind of prepared comment. I guess, one of the things I've read some of the communications we've received in the past few days to give us a little window into the process. I don't recognize most of the new names on this, which I see as a positive. I'm hopeful that the list was assembled with good intention and the new members can bring the balanced and informed perspective and willingness to listen that the board desires and expects from the CAC. While I may be starting from a place of skepticism, I'm hopeful that the discussion and feedback we receive isn't tinged with so much of the political rhetoric that we felt here at the board table. I'm hopeful that this next version of the CAC can work together to discuss the ideas, issues, and plans that we bring to them with balance, compassion, and integrity, and can be a partner in helping us mend the divide that exists in our community. I think that's going to be on each member, and that's going to be on the leaders they choose, maybe next week. I look forward to attending the CAC meeting next week on behalf of the board and listening to the process. Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Okay.
I'll
Oh,
just
go
make
ahead.
one comment, Chris. So one thing that I've heard continually over the past year is that the CAC has really stepped up this past year, and really provided some valuable feedback and information for us. Brad and I were in on the bylaw committee revisions, and going through all that, I don't know that it's always just geographic. Like if we look at the board here, yourself, Rob, myself, and Dave all live like in a very small part, and yet we each have a unique background that we bring, a unique insight. But I do understand we would like to have, every school represented. but I would hope that wouldn't be like at the expense, I hope that we don't make that the top priority, because we also want people who are committed to coming to the meetings, who are committed to engaging and participating. So I think this past year we had a good experience, what I hear, and hopefully going forward we will as well. And I agree with Brad. I would love to see some unity in our community as a whole.
Just one comment I want to offer to this. So we had a lot of conversation with the subcommittee on just the aspect of the discussion around all of the different dimensions, right? That's important to find and see balance on the committee. I want you to recognize on a 36-member committee, attempting to balance that mathematically on all the different dimensions you might deem to be important when we talk about geography, when we talk about kids in school, not in school, how old, when we talk about the demographic of of our school district. That's just a lot of dimensions. And to be honest with you, as we really tried to unpack that, honestly, the more we unpack that, the more I'm sure there's some very, very, very smart mathematician that could write a formula that would try to do that, but I think it would be next to impossible. And truthfully, I'm not sure that's the intent, right? I think our goal is to have balance and bring thoughtful discussion, around issues. So again, just as you close and you take a vote, right? I would hope for the board, if you have any concerns about this, we have this conversation on the front end of the selection process next year, so that if you have input on things that you think we ought to consider, let's have that discussion and have you articulate that to us, because I think it becomes dangerous when we sort of like armchair that in arrears, right? As we're evaluating a decision, rather than saying if there's criteria that's really important, let's get it out on the front end so that we can be cognizant of it. I sat on the committee, so I just want to make sure you know and understand that I was a part of the process, a part of the input in shepherding the bylaws. And what I would say to you confidently is that I believe the committee was true to the bylaws in the evaluation that they put, and that's what's most important.
So that segues, I think, into my comments that, that I would like to make. At the last meeting, or it was the last meeting, maybe it was the meeting before that, where we approved the bylaws, one of the things that I asked was that we come back and look at those bylaws at the end of, for this year, for the next selection committee process of this. I went through as well. I appreciate there's a lot of time that the selection committee spent on this process, and I don't want to. I want that to be recognized, that they did spend quite a bit of time. Our Franklin, if I was looking at the middle school, our Franklin population of representation did increase. I recognize, as Mrs. Wheaton said, our Edison is still on the low side. So one of the things that I asked at the last meeting when we were talking about bylaws was that every board member attends a Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. We start thinking about those bylaws. Maybe we have this conversation February, March-ish. I know I have a list of things. I don't need to talk about them tonight, but I already have a list of things that I'd like to have us think about as we're doing that. I'll just throw one idea out there, is that the selection committee is voted on by the group. Everybody puts their names in and the whole group votes for them. And then we know that that's representation from that group of who they would like to be on that selection committee. I've got other things as well, but I think everyone has an opportunity to see, and like I said, I attended a fair amount of meetings last year. It was a high-functioning group. There was a lot of good discussion that came out of there. We want to continue to see it be productive. And we do want to also be making sure that we are having the representation and that we are hoping to have from that group, and diverse backgrounds and perspectives, and that's what we want. We want the conversation to come out of that. So, like I said, I have a list of things. I think other board members, as you're thinking about it, what could we do for this process to be, take out maybe some emotion, take out whatever that's coming into this. How can we do this to make sure that we're doing this in a way that we've identified, geography, whatever those pieces are. We're making sure whether we're using checklists, as we're blind reading them, whatever it is that the group is going to do. There's definitely some things that I think can be done to make the selection process be a little bit easier. So I'm in agreement with Dr. Schuler. Let's address what we want that to look like on the front end before the committee is formed. Okay? Yes.
Sorry, I didn't get
Yeah,
your
I'm
attention
sorry.
before you talked. No, that's okay. I mean, I especially agree with the last two with Dr. Schuler and your comments. I'm disappointed with the tone of some of the communication and that it seems to have become politicized. But if we keep in mind the work of what the advisory committee is doing, it is advisory. And so I think it does matter. We do want it fair and balanced. I think what you talked about in terms of selection going forward maybe can be looked at. But, we've stalled this, not intentionally, but as we revisited the bylaws. And there is no perfect formula. And I think it is, I feel like I feel like it's time to, all right, I'm going to approve based on the work that's been done and then the need to get the committee moving forward.
Hearing no other comments or questions from board members, I ask for a motion and a second to approve the 2022-2023 Citizens Advisory roster as presented. Moved by Mr. Hanlon,
Second.
second by Mr. Long. Mrs. Hutchinson, will you please call the vote?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes. Next up is approve release of portion of July 13th, 2022 closed meeting minutes pertaining to request for reconsideration of media complaint. Dr. Schuler.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. As the board is aware, we met on July 13th in closed session to discuss a reconsideration of media complaint. I want to say very openly for the board and community, I advise you to do that. I did that with what I felt was the best information and how I advised the board to process that. We did, through the feedback from the public access counselor, get clear feedback that was not the right choice, and so I own that. Certainly I apologize for that. We have every intention on complying. I just want to offer something for clarity. That evening, separate from the reconsideration of media complaint, after the board came out, had its discussion and took a vote, we went back into executive session to discuss other topics, collective bargaining, the appointment of somebody to fill a vacancy on the board. So the reason why the motion says a partial release or release of a portion of the meeting is because there were other topics that were discussed when you went back into closed session. So we are releasing in full any of the discussion related to the reconsideration of media complaint, and we are releasing in full with the redaction only of a couple of specific names, the full minutes from that meeting. So I would recommend you move forward with the action on both items 2 and 3.
Any questions or comments from board members? Yeah.
Clarifying, and and when the way that I look at this is, a lot of my career was spent as a project manager, and at the end of a project, we would have what's called a postmortem, where we would sit down as a team and talk about what went well and what didn't go so well, so we can try to improve going forward. And so I think I just want to maybe try to clarify, kind of what exactly will be released. So the audio recording, the minutes, is the complaint itself also made public? Because that's what we are talking about. And I'm not saying it should or it shouldn't. I'm just asking. And
You are releasing the minutes and the audio recording.
Right, but is the actual complaint?
There's a portion of the complaint that was already released through a FOIA
Okay.
request with some redactions tied to it.
Okay, and that does not change, is that correct? Okay. Again, I'm just clarifying for public knowledge, for our knowledge, like what exactly is public and what still remains, as I guess as part of, I don't know, it's executive session or not subject to FOIA. What's the right word there? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me.
Just, I think because people are going to want to know as much as they can about this,
Yeah.
thinking that they're,
We are releasing the recording from the closed session and the minutes from the closed session.
okay, and nothing else changes as far as
Nothing-
FOIA requests
nothing
around,
else. Any other FOIA requests that we've received around this, we've released that information.
and nothing
that wouldn't
changes.
change.
Okay, that's all I'm saying. And then, I guess, moving forward, if we have another media challenge, I guess I would like to figure out what do we do differently next time? And what I mean by that, do we just fully discuss it? Because it still technically is a complaint against an employee, correct? Would you agree with that? Or I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like if that's what?
Yeah.
Different?
And
Okay.
Can I just respectfully, you have a motion tied specifically to releasing those. That if that's a discussion you want to have, I just
Okay.
don't want to. I don't want to tie up this item. I want to be clear on the two actions that the board is
Okay.
taking right now.
I
And if
apologize.
that's something you got,
Okay.
that's okay. If that's something you want to discuss, I think at another another meeting, I think we do that, right? Because
Okay.
you have a district process on the handling of reconsideration of media, and if that's something we want to discuss at a future meeting and really talk about that process and any adjustments, changes, we should do that with enough time to prepare for that discussion. And
Okay. I apologize. Okay, yeah, I wasn't trying to, I was just trying to,
sure.
I just like to figure it out. So,
Yeah.
okay, I totally respect that, and thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments?
And just kind of piggybacking on what Susan requested at first about the release of the complaint itself, I did ask about the FOIA document, and you explained why the redacted portions would remain redacted. So can you just review that really quickly? Like what? I thought it helped me understand why we weren't releasing documents. So.
Any of the reports that are included as part of an investigative process are not releasable via FOIA, right? The outcome is, right? The action of the board is, in this case, obviously, both the minutes and the closed session recording are, but in any investigative process, any reports gathered along the way are not fully releasable via FOIA. Some aspects of them may be, especially if they pertain to an existing approved public document or procedure that's in place for the district, but the specific notes. So in the same way, anything brought forward by the individual registering the complaint, any of their individual notes brought forward and shared are not releasable via FOIA.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I ask for a motion and a second to approve the release of the portion of the July 13th, 2022 closed meeting minutes pertaining to the request for reconsideration of media complaint as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Booten, second by Mr. Hanlon. Mrs. Hutchison, will you please call the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. We have one more. Approve release of portion of July 13th, 2022 closed verbatim recording pertaining to request for reconsideration of media complaints. I think you've covered everything, Dr. Schuler.
Yes.
Are there any questions or comments regarding that? I ask for a motion and a second to approve the release of portion of July 13th, 2022 closed verbatim recording pertaining to request for reconsideration of media complaint as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hanlon,
Second.
second by Mrs. Booten. Mrs. Hutchison, will you please call the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. Next up is oral reports, Vision 2026 Professional Learning Program Update. I see we have Mrs. Murphy up at the podium already.
We do. We have two oral reports for you this evening on items from your strategic plan. The first being a professional development report, a critical strategy in your plan, and the second being a human resource update. So, Mrs. Murphy.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present an update on one of your strategic goals, that being professional learning. Mr. Spencer is joining me tonight and providing this update. Just a reminder on your Vision 2026 strategic plan on the academic excellence side, the fifth strategy states that we will develop a comprehensive professional learning program and support system for staff. There are 3 tactics related to that strategy that we are working on this year that I've listed below. And we're going to walk through the work that is taking place or is going to take place with regards to each of these. So first being, we're starting with the first tactic, recognize and plan for professional learning within all academic and social emotional learning strategies. So the specific work plan task this year for this tactic is to provide teachers with professional learning for illustrative math or IM materials and the pilot materials to provide Tier 1 math instruction to all students. We are taking an approach that's recommended from the instruction partners, which is a source we use quite often. And this approach talks about that you need to provide 3 pillars of teacher support. And so those 3 pillars are train, plan, and coach. So let's start with the first pillar, train. Train refers to the explicit training that teachers, instructional coaches, and school leaders need to successfully implement instructional materials. So after the board approved the resource for illustrative math, we began doing training sessions immediately after. So the first 3 bullets actually happened last spring before our teachers even started teaching illustrative math. And we were lucky enough to be able to train about 150 teachers that then supported the rest of their buildings. The other wonderful thing about the work that we're doing in the training space is both Dr. Salagi and Mr. Spencer have been supporting this big lift with IM. And so Dr. Salagi provided some training that is called Mathematical Mindsets, and Mr. Spencer provided training to our math coaches on cooperative learning, which is an area of expertise for him. Training is always responsive to the needs of our staff, so it's not a one and done. So there have been 2 events that have happened, one that has happened recently and one that is upcoming. So just within the last 2 weeks, we worked with both our coaches and our principals on diving deeper into the assessments. And then we also are providing some additional trainings that come from illustrative math that are responsive to what we're hearing from our staff, that they need some extra training and support for their multilingual learners. Moving into the next pillar of plan. So plan refers to the collaborative or independent planning process that teachers engage in on a daily basis, weekly or quarterly basis to successfully implement the instructional materials. The idea with this is that teachers become more knowledgeable about the materials. So we have utilized this quite a number of times already. And our staff provided feedback in saying that it would be most helpful at the September Institute Day if they had time to collaboratively plan and work with math coaches. We have professional learning communities, or PLCs. Our coaches spend quite a bit of time supporting teachers in that space. We are also utilizing funds so that coaches can work with staff, and there would be a sub in the classroom, and they could spend about a half a day working with the coach in planning and preparation. And then we're currently working on a plan, Dr. Slaggy has this underway, to provide 2 additional half days of planning for elementary teachers during the 2nd semester. And then the last pillar is one we've talked about quite frequently. This is a coach. A coach provides ongoing feedback to teachers so they can receive and improve content-specific instructional practices and strengthen their use of the curriculum. So a coach is really where all of those 3 pillars intersect. They make them all come alive. All of our elementary buildings do have a full-time coach to provide job-embedded professional learning. I do think it's important to also recognize that those coaches also serve as interventionists at times as well. When we say the term job-embedded professional development, this is what we specifically mean. It means that the professional learning that our staff receive on a day-to-day basis, and it's designed to help their content-specific instructional practices with the intent of improving professional learning.
We are also following these same 3 pillars with the middle school math pilot that is happening right now. So the middle school math teachers receive training on both of the resources that they are piloting. Our coaches that we now have at all 4 middle schools spend a significant amount of time planning with those teachers to provide support and preparation for their teaching and their lessons. And we are very excited, once again, to say that we do have the 4 full-time coaches at those buildings. So you do have another work plan item on your strategic plan for this year related to this tactic, and that was to provide teachers with ongoing professional learning for the elementary ELA pilot materials. Again, utilizing the train coach plan model, our teachers have our school leaders and our teachers have received training on what we call the ELA shifts. We talked about this with the approval of the pilot materials. We have a book study happening. And our teachers are also participating in training from the vendors of those materials. Actually, the first training session is happening this Friday. We do have reading coaches at our elementary buildings. And once again, to help our teachers be prepared for that pilot, they have the ability to utilize funds for subs to work with their coaches for a half day in planning and preparation. Moving into the next tactic, this is develop a professional learning program to support new staff members. For this tactic, we've included the following on our work plan. Engage in research for a high-quality mentor program. The Professional Growth Committee is included in our negotiated contract. This joint committee includes equal representation between administrators and teachers. The purpose of the committee is to establish and promote and maintain meaningful professional opportunities to enhance professional development in District 200. The committee meets multiple times a year, and the committee decided that this year the focus would be on teacher mentorship programs. And so we are starting that work this year by utilizing EAB. And EAB is our research collaborative that we work with. They release best practices and programming that happen in other schools that we can utilize to implement in our buildings. I'm going to turn this over now to Mr. Spencer to talk about instructional coaching.
Good evening, everyone. Rounding out what Mrs. Murphy had talked about with our Vision 2026 about developing comprehensive professional development for our staff here is this notion of this job-embedded professional development being the most, one of the most valuable sources of professional development that we can give to staff, and that does come in the form of our instructional coaches. The work plan that sits around this tactic of creating a vision for instructional coaching comes from, and I know that Dr. Schuler has mentioned this at previous board meetings, but just to give the board some context, we have around 45 staff members district-wide that have some sort of formal coaching duty as part of their position. So that's 45 staff members that work with staff members. You know, we talked about math coaches, we have ELA coaches, instructional technology and innovation coaches, all different types of roles. So eventually what we want to see through Vision 2026 is to create a centralized vision of what instructional coaching should be, knowing that there's different types of coaching going on in our district. So this year what we're going to focus on as part of our work plan is an information gathering process. Before we can develop a overall centralized vision of instructional coaching, we have to have a grasp on what type of instructional coaching is currently going on in each building, knowing that there's different types of coaches throughout the district. Having said that, that requires some stakeholder engagement. We know that we can't just stop our work with using our coaches to the best of their ability and not do anything until this instructional coaching framework is created. So what we have done is to start engaging our EC12 administrators in what small things can they do this year to best utilize whatever types of coaches they have in their building. So most recently, we did some work with them around what we are going to call building sustainable cultures of learning that would lead their building staff members to embrace a coaching system. Initially, when a building gets an instructional coach in their building for the first time, it's a different experience to have that coach be invited into your classroom and actually utilize them in the appropriate manner. So really what we're working on with our administrators is forming that relationship between principal and coach to create a culture where it's natural to want to be coached by some of the staff members that we see throughout the district. As far as information gathering from our actual coaches, what I've started to do is engage in some feedback loops with each group that we have in the district. And here I've listed the types of coaches that we have throughout District 200, along with some of the dates that I'll be engaging them in some of these feedback sessions. And with that, any questions?
Questions or comments from board members?
Going back to the coaching, is of the program we're trying to put in place, is the objective to put a standard process in place, or to put standard guiding principles? I'm confused on what the objective is.
So I would say guiding principles, because I think different coaches do different things.
Yeah.
So that interaction and relationship that each coach might have, a math coach is going to have a slightly different role than a generalized instructional coach, than maybe a support specialist in our special ed department. So when I think about guiding principles, what's our mission and vision of what coaching should serve? Probably to improve student learning, right? But upon that, are there some universal expectations that an administrator should understand about what the role of a coach should be, what the role of a coach should be, no matter what type of interaction they have, and maybe what are the expectations and the culture of a staff member to utilize a coach?
So I like the stakeholder analogy, right? That context. And so I heard principals as stakeholder, building administrators stakeholder. Who are your other stakeholders?
So the stakeholders, first and foremost, in this information gathering would be the coaches themselves, along with principals. And then once we get that feedback, we'll turn it around back to actual staff members in the buildings as well.
Is there value in tapping into department chairs or some kind of that first level of teacher leadership? Maybe that's the wrong word,
So at least at the high school level that have department chairs, we would include them in the coaches' kind of initial feedback, since they do serve some sort of coaching role responsible for helping their staff members in their departments. Absolutely.
Yeah, the idea I'm getting after is I don't want it to happen to me. I want to be part of the conversation, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions or comments?
How is that working? Are they able to fulfill both of those roles? Because in the initial part of your presentation, the coaching was kind of what tied all those things together. And so if they're also wearing this necessary hat of providing interventions to students, do they have enough time to also wear the coach hat?
Honestly, I think if you spoke with them, they would say they would love to be able to coach all day. I think that our buildings that have the full-time math coach that also does intervention, they have a busy day.
Would you say they can spend the majority of their time coaching? Do we have enough resources for the intervention that they can do that?
They are able to prioritize all of the students that they believe need intervention, and what we have redesigned our math block, and I think that's an important part of this conversation. And so we have gone from a 60-minute block to a 90-minute block, and with that extra 30 minutes, that's when it's the common time to provide additional fluency supports or also differentiated instruction. And so instead of our students being pulled out of the classroom. Our coaches are going in during that time, and so it really has that opportunity to serve more than one purpose. They're able to be in the classroom to support students, but they're able to also be in the classroom to model to teachers to how to best support students with that additional time.
That's helpful. And then I have a question on the last slide. For the instructional coaches, is that just at the high school level, or would there be instructional coaches in addition to math and reading coaches at elementary?
When you see that term instructional coaches, that's identifying our high school level coaches.
Question for I'm sorry, Julie, were you done? Okay. I just had a quick question for the coaching part, like I guess at any level, but I kind of thought of it when you were talking about elementary, that do the teachers ask for the coach to come in, or does the coach just go in and observe? I guess, how does that relationship work? Like, who, do you know what I mean? Like, is it just the coach going around the classrooms? I don't know if that's what Mr. Spencer was talking about, developing those guidelines, but is the teacher requesting the coach, or is the coach just there to kind of blanketly coach everyone? I feel like I'm not asking that question well.
I think I understand what you're asking. This is certainly the work that Mr. Spencer is doing, making it transparent to everyone how you do utilize a coach and the value of that. So I would say a little bit of everything is happening right now. I would like to emphasize that staff are spending, or our coaches are spending a lot of time supporting new teachers. At the elementary level, with the adoption of a new resource, I think that provides an opportunity that everybody feels that there's a lot of value in having a coach in a classroom. So that has, created a new experience for staff going in and being coached. But I think this is part of the reason why Mr. Spencer is doing this work, to make it really clear on the value of coaching.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
I have a question about the training. Is this just examples of some of the training that's going on, or one, the illustrative math? Or
These are all of the trainings that we currently have offered or planning to offer up to this time. I do believe that there will be more training as our staff express needs.
Okay. And the reason I ask is because this illustrative math is new. So as, I don't know the timing of the training. I just think of training I get, say, for a new system, and then 6 months later we put the system on, need to be retrained. Like, so that the people that maybe need refresher, is that the coaching, or is there opportunities to repeat the training? And then in year 2, if we have new teachers, I'm guessing, well, I don't know, are the skills or this illustrative math concept going to be part of the skill set teachers come out of school with going forward? But then, so how do new staff that this may be new to get trained in future years?
So I would believe we would continue to do what we did this year. And so Danielle Moran, we gave her a time on when we have the new teachers come in August. She actually had time with all new elementary teachers, and she provided the training that you see listed on the slide, the Teach and Learn training. She provided that to every new teacher. And again, I do know that the coaches, those are really a lot of times the first people that they go and support as the school year gets up and running. And I think this is also another reason why our professional growth committee identified the need for teacher mentorship as well. So,
thanks.
Other questions or comments?
I have a couple, just not too many. I thought Dave was going to get to it. So these are the trainings you're offering, and this is just a curiosity question, not really. So on the September Institute Day, middle and high school teachers had something else to do?
correct.
Okay. And then the slide above that, slide 5, I think you said there were 150 teachers who took part in the spring 2022 training for IM.
The school-based leaders training, that second bullet, teach and learn session for school-based leaders.
Okay, so that 150 number is about how many from each elementary school, I guess. I guess I could do the math, but
Yeah.
it's not every teacher.
Correct. But what happened after that is our coaches trained their building on that information that we received.
Okay. And is there time built in, like a specific training for the entire building, or is it through that coaching?
It was for the entire building. So the second bullet point, teach and learn session for school-based leaders. We had 150 teachers participate in that. And then following that training, our coaches put together resources and they presented that at 2 staff meetings to their entire staff.
Okay. One little last question for Jason. So, sorry about that. The creation of the vision of the instructional coaching isn't going to change how coaching actually looks right now. It's just kind of defining it.
Well, as I kind of mentioned to Mr. Hanlon, this framework is going to be more guiding principles, right? Because what a math coach does, especially since part of their day is as interventionist, that might look much different than what a generalized instructional coach at high school might do. That might be a little different than what a reading coach might be expected to do. So these are just going to be general expectations of what we think should be universally, what universal principles might exist to help improve student learning.
Okay, so but it's not going to change what it looks like in, like, say, at Emerson.
No. So what each building is going to be responsible for how they utilize their coach under the guise that here are some guiding principles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else from board members? I just have one comment to make. I had the opportunity to be in a different district last week professionally, and I was talking with a group of teachers as they shared with me some frustration that they had in their district that the ESSER money was spent for facilities and how they really, really needed coaching for coming out of these pandemic years and just with some of the strains. And I actually made a phone call to Dr. Schuler to say thank you, because I do feel that this money that we are spending and this time and energy is supporting our staff, that we really need to support our staff as well as our students, through this time. And I love the idea of coaching. Mr. Biskin mentioned that today when I was in the class, that they're going to be having instructional coaches for the first time. And I appreciate that there's a plan in place in terms of purpose and that's behind it. So thank you. Okay, thank you. Next up is HR. Dr. Kyle's making his way up there.
All right, thanks for having me and giving me an opportunity for the annual update on human resources. But what we tried to do this year is look at human resources through Vision 2026. So as I start, I'd like to thank the members in my department, Mariana, Christy, Jennifer, Janelle, Pauline, Bethany, and Eileen. All of them have done a good job of working very hard to make sure we staff our buildings and to make sure that learning continues to happen. So wanted to share one of the targets that's really a big part of the Human Resources Department and things that I've been working on this year. One of the biggest targets, the operational excellence strategy, is hire, develop, retain diverse, high-quality staff. So we have a number of tactics that you could see: actively recruit a diverse pool of candidates, maintain competitive wages, proactively address staff shortages and workforce needs, and implement grow your own teacher career pathway. I've been talking about that for a couple of years, and we've made some pretty good inroads that I want to share tonight. Actively support dual credit certification for secondary teachers. That's been some of the things that we've done that I thought I'd share with the board tonight. Just an overview of what we did last year. Hired 563 staff, 117 guest teachers, guest employees, also called substitutes. Last year, when there was a vaccine mandate, we lost over 120 guest employees. So we've slowly tried to build that back up. Processed 541 resignations, about 1,100 employee assignment changes, processed 183 leaves, coordinated 185 student teachers and observation placements. That's the thing that we continue to do through COVID because we felt like we needed to continue to let the people in college learn how to teach so they could become teachers. So we never stopped. Processed 156 graduate coursework changes, 257 micro-credentials. I think the board has been a big supporter of that, and our staff has dipped into micro-credentials so that they could continue to grow as professionals. 120 service award recipients, and then I'm the FOIA officer, so I like to put how many FOIAs, 92. That was actually down by 100 for last year, so that's a good thing from my end, just because I'm the FOIA officer. Processed 244 permissive transfers. Those of you that maybe don't know what a permissive transfer is or haven't heard of it, that's something we offer up if parents are willing to have transportation for their child to go to another school, and if there's space, we do that. So it's a very helpful thing. One thing I wanted to share with the board is a new product that we added this past hiring season is Interview Stream, where there's 3 questions that every applicant for a certified position answered these questions. And the feedback from our EC12 principals and assistant principals was they loved it because they don't have to call somebody and do a phone screen. They don't have to set that up. People just answer these 3 questions. And right off of those 3 questions, you can figure out, maybe I have a pool of 40 and I want to kind of whittle it down to 10 for the second round. So those are the 3 questions that we used. I've used it. We just we're at the process of offering a position to a 1.0 orchestra teacher that we've really struggled to find. And weirdly enough, I had the opportunity to see her application was done, and I saw her first 3 questions, and I was like, she's good. And then got the 2 middle school orchestra teachers to see it as well. We brought her in, incredible. So we're using this interview stream to try and help streamline, try and help our administrators as they go through the hiring season to help them through that process. Just some of the benefits you can read. I talked about a lot of these already. I probably should have switched the screen on that, but really we've liked it so much that during the process, we're going to start using it for administrative screening too. When we have AP position open, administrative positions open, and then I think eventually we're going to look also for non-certified staff as well. Because it's just a helpful tool that doesn't seem too exciting, but for all of the people that are going through the hiring process, we found it to be very beneficial. Here's some head counts. I've always shown the board kind of where we're at. FY 21, 22, and 23. It's kind of where we're at. Retirements last school year. We had a lot less retirements last year than the year before, which was a good thing. But that kind of gives you where we're at as a district with head counts. Then this is tactic number 1, actively recruit a diverse pool of candidates. The board has had that charge, I think, since I've been here. So I've done things like I've gone to different job fairs. We have talked to our principals and assistant principals about trying to recruit more diverse candidates. We've done a good job. We're still trying to move towards trying to match the amount of teachers we have with the students that we actually have in the district. So we have some work to do. Some of the things that are some barriers are that the teaching, there's just a lot less teaching candidates. So with a lot less teaching candidates, there's a lot less diverse teaching candidates. But what I'd say is some of the things that I've learned through a couple of administrator academies and just sessions on how to recruit, hire, and retain diverse staff. One of the things is important is to bring the staff that you have together and talk to them about how they are doing in our district. What are some things that we could do to help make it a better fit for them? And then a great asset to all of our diverse teachers is to also utilize our diverse teachers to go find other diverse teachers to come to our school district. So we're working on that right now. We're not going to stop trying to find diverse candidates, but what I would share with everybody is you always said high quality teachers. All the teachers we hire, all the support staff we hire, everybody's high quality. It's not just because somebody's diverse. I just wanted to throw that out there. Another thing is competitive wages. We're actually working with the CEA to look at opening up the current contract to address some concerns with wages and benefits that would make us more competitive with our comparative districts. We're actually meeting tomorrow with Penny Coyle, who's the CEA president, to see what they're looking at and what we would like to open up. We would like to tackle that this school year. And then negotiations. I've been meeting with the lead negotiator of the WWEA every 2 weeks, And we've been talking about what things we're looking at for the next contract. And, we're obviously meeting together with our administrative team, and we're getting ready for negotiations that'll start up in January. And then a couple categories that aren't covered by any contracts, like the substitutes. The board approved increasing guest pay from $115 to $125. Permanent guest teachers, I'm going to say this again. I thank you for supporting that. I was at a LUDA conference this past weekend with HR directors, assistant soups, whatever you want to call them. And there's only 2 schools out of about 30 different people that said they were part of HR that actually have permanent guest teachers. I almost didn't want to raise my hand and say we had it and it's really been helpful because I don't want anybody to take from ours. But what I would say is the permanent guest teachers, we have been able to hire 1 to 3 at elementary, 3 to 5 at middle, and 5 to 7 in high school. And that has really helped us lower the amount of internal subbing that we would be using teachers to do. We're building up our sub pool, but we have not reached where we were before COVID. We're going to continue to do that, but the perm sub has been one of the biggest highlights that we've used. We post all our positions. I attend a lot of job fairs. We're using QR codes, contracting out hard to fill. That's one of the things that we've had to lean on a little bit more this year than we've had in other years, is the kind of contracting out for people that we just can't find candidates. And then something that Erica Luacano and I have been working on, and I think this is something I got reinforced last week at this conference, is we have a brand here in District 200. Why CUSD200? It's kind of a marketing attempt that we're going to continue to push forward. Let's talk with the people that work here as to why they love working in this district. And in this competitive field where everybody's looking for the same people, people are going to want to work in districts that have a great reputation. And people who have been here for 15, 20, 3 years, how many years, why do they love working for our district? Our challenges, special ed, teacher assistants has been difficult this year. Psychologists, we had them all filled until a really, really bad day in June. On Friday, we had 3 resignations. That was really demoralizing, and we haven't found any replacements. So we've worked through some overages. We've leaned on some of our psychologists to make sure that we fill those gaps. Guest teachers, special ed teachers, bilingual teachers, lunchroom supervisors, and then secretarial, clerical, support staff, and then student supervisors at the high school. Those are the people that walk through the whole high school. They probably put in 7 to 8 miles a day, walk in the building. Right now, we've got some people covering those positions, but those are the ones we're looking for, and those are the ones we'd like to try to address as we look for next hiring season. And then I've talked about this a lot, and I have to say Ian Smith has done the majority of the work with the high school assistant principals at both high schools. But you've heard a lot about the 3 sections of Introduction to Teaching. 1 section at South, 2 sections at North. We have 66 students. That's incredible. Because I really do think this is the pathway. If we want to grow our own, we also want to identify diverse students to become diverse teachers. This is I really feel like this is going to be a really good pathway, not only to beef up teachers, but also to find diverse teachers. And then 214 staff requested to be mentors. That was way more than the actual amount of kids we had. So I thought that was pretty cool. They have 3 full-day field trips each semester to go to the school that they're working at, and 2 times a week, students go to their school for field experience, and then we're working actively right now just to, like, the first wave of students, but we also want to see if we could find some more diverse students to increase that as well. And then number 5, Ian Smith again. We're really looking to hit more dual credit classes. You're going to start seeing more and more of those come forward to you. Ian Smith last year surveyed all the high school teachers who's interested. The next step was, okay, you're interested, but how many credits do you have? So we reviewed credits to see how many credits they have. And really, if you want to teach a core academic course, somebody has to have 18 hours in the subject area, or they could have 9 working towards the 18. So COD has actually been really helpful with us in this situation. And I'm kind of excited about this opportunity, because the more dual credit offerings we have, the better it is going to be for a student to go to college and pay less. That's a good thing. Non-core classes could be a bachelor's degree with a combination of teaching and work experience. It just depends on one or the other. We work with COD closely. And this is also going to be one of the things that we're going to work on in January when we start negotiating the next contract, is language about dual certification. And when we need somebody to be a dual certified teacher, we're going to get past the point of who wants to, and there's going to be a point where, like, we need a couple, one at each high school. How do we do that? So we're working with the union on that. And again, just kind of bringing you back, this year with my goals, it's really around Vision 2026. It's about the hire, develop, and retain diverse, high-quality staff. Done a really good job this past year. I'm not going to lie and say there aren't issues in the job market. I just sat with about 30 other HR people, and we're all trying to share ideas how we can, continue to improve and get better at that. So everybody's looking at the same issues. We're going to continue to try new things. Like one last example I'm going to give you that I haven't even told everybody in the HR department, but like an old school job fair, like just having people come. We have a number of jobs. We're going to do an old school job fair. There's a district, U46, that had 70 people show up. They hired 40. So we're going to do that. So we're putting that together. We're going to do what we can to make sure we hit all these tactics and get to the point when we get to 2026, we could see big progress. So that's my formal presentation. Any questions from the board?
Questions or comments for Dr. Kyle?
It's exciting. I see why you're, all
I'm
fired
excited.
up. I know, I get it. And the things that we're doing, the creative things we're doing, the way we're collaborating with other professionals, trying to come up with new ideas, going back to some old ideas, it's fantastic. So just thank you to you and the staff and everyone who's contributed to what I would call a very creative approach to, a challenging issue we face across the board. So thank you. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
I had a couple of questions. Do you know about what percentage of applicants end up getting hired?
I don't have that percentage, but I can get that to you.
I'm just curious, given, how tight things.
I can tell you that
I forgot
the-
what you said when you went to your orientation as a teacher. You were one of 3,000.
No, it was more than that. It was like 4,000. There was I think 40 of us, and that included administrators that were hired that
And I
year.
know the ratio is much higher.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
It's gotten smaller in all levels. Like, I'll just give you orchestra. We've never had a problem finding an orchestra teacher. This year was a struggle. We're finally filling that, but that's just showing that almost every candidacy pool has dropped tremendously. I'm, many moons into this career, but it's dropped tremendously. I think we're not the only school district that's going to do a grow your own. We need to make sure that we get more young men and young women in the teaching profession because we need them. It's at a critical point right now.
I mean, to Rob's point, it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's not just
The interview stream, is that like a video application? It's not interactive, right?
no, it's just the 3 questions they recorded. I think they get 2 chances. They have to have it within, I think, a minute and a half. We've dropped each answer to a minute and a half. They get 2 opportunities to record their answer.
Do we do any online, Zoom interviews, or is it all in
Oh,
person?
yeah, there are times we do. Eventually, we got to get them right in front of us, right?
Of course,
So
but
that's what
screening.
we learned through COVID is you can do the screening, but eventually we need to get that person in front of us. And so, yeah, we have used Google Meets and Zoom and things like that.
And then, what's the difference between a permanent guest teacher and a long-term guest teacher?
Yeah, so the permanent guest teacher goes to different jobs throughout the day. They're not grading papers. They're not making lesson plans. The long-term is coming in for a long-term leave, and they're actually grading. They're grading homework. They're putting grades in. That's the difference between the two.
So they're almost like a replacement for somebody on a maternity
Yes.
leave or something?
Yes.
Okay. Just, I would think, just intuitively, permanent would be higher than long-term.
Right.
And I knew there had to be an explanation.
Permanent sub was just Dr. Rammer before me. He was the one who thought of it, and we've just left the names the same.
It's good. I just wanted to understand. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question regarding the COD requirements for dual credit teachers. Is that, so it needs a master in the subject area. So if you were an individual who had a master's degree in math, but not any education certification for a high school level course, could you teach that dual credit course?
If you had a master's in math, you could teach a dual credit class in math because that's going to meet the requirement.
Even if you're
Hold
not
on.
certified to
Shelley,
teach in
no,
high school?
You would still have to have a teaching certificate.
Yeah.
That's my question, okay.
Yeah. You still have to
Oh,
have
I'm
a
sorry.
teaching
Yeah.
certificate.
Okay.
Sorry about
Thank
that.
you.
Any other questions or comments?
I'm curious if we do exit interviews with teachers that go to other job opportunities and if there were any common themes you saw.
Yeah, we don't have like a formal exit interview, but when people have shared that they want to do an exit interview, myself or Christy Kuntz have met with all certified and non-certified members, and they will share. They'll give us feedback, and then we utilize that with the school or if there's a theme.
And then I know at the school that my children attended, there's a shortage for the BSP program. I was curious in the hiring challenge if that was what those positions were considered and if there were wait lists at other schools.
BASP has been difficult. We found this year more of a challenge than other years, so it's
Before and after school care.
Thank you. So it's before and the after school. So that has been a challenge as well. We hope to address that when we reopen the CEA contract.
Do you know how many schools have wait lists for that?
I would have to defer to Dr. Salagi. He might know that more than me because he oversees it, but I do not have that answer. I could get it to you.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, I'm sorry.
Chris, go ahead.
I was just going to say, sometimes that is rolling dependent upon the enrollment and how many kids are coming, but many of our schools have aide or assistant positions, just standing openings, because a lot of times we're utilizing kids from our high schools and maybe they can only work a day or two a week. So sometimes we like to see what their work availability is and then also know what the flow of our parents are. They're using it, if they're using it once or twice a week. So we do have positions standing opening at multiple ones. We can give you the exact number, but you might see positions posted and it may only be for somebody who we need 2 days a week.
I think the question was student. Are you talking about on the student side? Do we know which schools have a student wait list?
Yeah.
A wait list to get into the schools. I can get that for you. Yeah.
One thing, have we recruited our high school seniors, those that early release, to do BASP? I know that's a typical where a lot of our people come from, that maybe it's even just a recruiting there that could help with the after-school BASP?
Yeah, we have, but we will continue to.
Yeah.
We are trying to turn every stone upside down to find anybody to come in. But again, like I'll just share, we keep high quality as our number one predictor there.
Any other questions or comments before I go on? Just something I'm thinking about here, the process for short-term sub-certificates. And I know you and I have had this conversation, and I know you've reached out to Wheaton College, but there's North Central. There's other local colleges. Our students that have, I can't remember the number of hours, but they're typically by their junior year have enough hours to get a short-term sub-certificate. Our community members, I'm just trying to think of where can we, are there high visible areas that we can, maybe, have a QR code at Starbucks, or places that we can get lunch supervisors, paras, substitutes. Maybe it's a short, quick video as to how it's not that hard to become a short-term substitute in this area. It's like a video that you have to go to some training. Just turn in your transcripts. You can get it within a day. Your transcripts evaluated by the ROE. Maybe there's something we can do a little, just get some information out there for, especially, maybe it's a stay-at-home parent that their kids have now entered the school, day, and they're trying to figure out something, hey, I could work 1 day a week. Even 1 day a week would fill that sub thing up. So
We will definitely, we could do that.
okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion item, middle school capital projects. I see Dr. O'Keefe is walking up there. Dr. Schuler, anything you want to start with?
No, I'm going to hand it right over to Dr. O'Keefe to get this kicked off for you.
Yep. Good evening. We've got a quick presentation for you tonight, and we'll certainly open it up for discussion. Tonight is really an extension of what we introduced to you at last month's board meeting. We've got a couple members of our team from Perkins and Will that I will introduce to you in a second. All of this, again, just as a kind of a set point, a reminder, is part of our Vision 2026 operational strategy is to ensure that we are investing in our facilities and we're meeting the needs as defined in the facility master plan that was created in 2016. Up really until this point in time, we focused all of our efforts on the elementary and high school side of things. And as I mentioned last time we were together, just about a year ago, Dr. Schuler and I came together to start talking about how we could begin the process of discussing needs surrounding our middle schools, since the investments have been directed in other places. We've re-engaged the team here at Perkins and Will. So Steve and Mike, who you will hear presenting in just a second, are part of that team that actually put together the 2016 Master Facility Plan. So they have an in-depth and deep knowledge of our district. Our focus this time, again, is on the middle schools. And got a quick presentation, and we'll certainly open up for discussion and/or questions. So Steve's on my right. Michael is behind me. I don't know who of you is kicking it off.
Thank you, Dr. O'Keefe. Steve Turks with Perkins and Will. It's a delight to be back with you. It's been a few years since we actually did the master plan. Tonight we have a very brief presentation for you, just to sort of set point to let you know kind of where we are with things right now, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So Mike and I will share the mic this evening. We're here. Mark Jolliker is also working with us. He happens to be on vacation this week, so he could not make it tonight. But Mike and I are with you tonight. I'd like to start with this slide quite a bit in our work, and really the idea of this is to make sure that we really understand the learning journey that your students are on before we really start talking about space. And so really sort of going back to the master plan that was the work that we did back in 2016 and 2017 to really understand what does that learning want to look like in your schools, and what kind of space then do we need to provide for that. So those conversations happened back then, and they are continuing now. One of the very first things we did, and we've been working with Dr. Schuler, Dr. O'Keefe, and Kevin in a sort of a district leadership format. One of the very first questions we asked was, let's take a look back at the 2016 document. A lot of good work was done then. One of the things that we did, we had a visioning session here in the district, and out of that came a series of guiding principles that we used to help guide the work back then. We did present this out to the community in a community engagement session then, and we asked the community actually to prioritize these. And the numbers, I see you have the presentation in front of you, the numbers sort of in the round dots off to the sides of those, just give you a sense for where the community landed in terms of how they prioritized them. You know, looking at those numbers, those were all, you know, I would say pretty equally weighted. Nothing really kind of rose to the top in terms of a real true priority. So that, I think we felt good about, that these are all really important to the district. You know, looking at the middle schools, clearly the three middle schools that are really part of what we're looking at now are the ones that are your older buildings. So suffice to say, in the need of most attention, most work. Hubble sort of sits over there as the newest building, and that is not a part of what we're looking at, although Hubble comes into the conversations occasionally.
So coming out of that master plan, there was a number of different common themes to the educational environments that we were looking at, and that came through from that master plan. A lot of those are shown right here, anything from looking at how classrooms are set up, how classrooms are developed for flexible education, improvements to science lab classrooms, library learning centers, accessibility, wayfinding, common spaces, and building finishes. These were things that came out of the previous master plan that we've heard, you know, continued discussions, because we use those as the basis for our discussions here with the schools now. And those continue to be things that we hear about as well. So what we've started to do is really to take through the discussions that we've had at each one of those schools to look at three different lenses for improvements. Everything we think ties directly into the academic improvements that we're looking at, but there's different ways to break it down. The capital focus is really focused on those improvements that even if we did nothing else to the configuration of the building, we'd still have to do that. So just because your buildings have aged, there's always something that we have to invest into the facilities for that. The aesthetic focus is because they have aged, there's also things that need to be improved, need to be brought up to date, need to freshen up the space, need to brighten up the space so that as we heard from some teachers, that it can be a place that they are proud to go into every day. The academic focus is a high priority of looking at how we improve the actual, how the facilities are supporting education on a daily basis. What things can be done to those educational environments to remove any hindrances that may be in place right now to allow for instruction to continue to advance now and into the future. We're not just looking at a static view of a school, we're looking at an evolution of a school here and how that can be flexible over time. And so just, looking at this is a really dense slide, but it shows that there's a lot of commonalities when we look at all three of these lenses at all three of these schools, and there's some unique aspects that happen at each one of the schools as well. We talked about earlier, coming out of the previous master plan, the idea that we look at the individual classrooms as well as those science lab classrooms. Look at the collaboration spaces. Those are still things that we hear about, and still things that we also are looking at. The ideas of student wellness and how those are improved and consolidated or distributed throughout the facilities. But there's specific ones to each one of the schools that are also priorities. If we look specifically at Monroe, there's special education is a high focus over there. The aesthetic focus is all looking at the interior finishes as well as the ideas of, especially at Franklin, we talk about improving wayfinding. There are some challenges to getting in and around Franklin. On the capital side, locker rooms, toilet facilities, accessibility is a huge issue that we want to make sure that we're addressing, as well as improving HVAC, looking at the basic elements of the school, understanding where they are, how they've aged, and what the improvements need to be done to meet not only today's standards, but moving forward as well. But there's also specific things. We look at Edison talking about window replacements and how that has a direct effect on the educational environment, and not just the facility itself, but the actual delivery of education, how those physical elements tie directly into that. So we look at our schedule and process. So this is a really straightforward diagram that shows how our information is flowing and our process is developed here. So each one of the schools has developed a building team, a concise group of representatives of each one of the buildings that we meet with. We bring ideas to them. We test out specific ideas, and then we start consolidating those ideas into larger plans. So recently we started looking at one or two specific ideas on how that would affect planning throughout the facility. Tested those ideas and got some feedback from them. We bring that information back to the executive committee, as Steve mentioned earlier, and then we continually have that feedback loop. We get some additional feedback from that group, bring that back to the building teams, and then bring that information further to the committee. When that's ready to be brought before the board, we're happy to bring that out here. So Steve will wrap up here with the overall schedule.
Yeah, so the red line that runs vertically through that on the screen or in front of you in your documents is today, October 12th. So the work that's happened already at this point, we did tour all the buildings earlier this summer, met with administrators there, did that without students in the building just to get, what are the issues that are really pressing on you now today that we should be looking at? Are the same things that we talked about back in 2016, 2017 still issues for you? Some things have been addressed in that time span. The district's done a good job, keeping up with the buildings. We have met several times, as Mike mentioned, with the executive committee. We've had one round of, actually 2 rounds at this point with the building teams, looking at various options. And that same process is going to roll forward here. After today's meeting, we've got another meeting set up on the 21st with the executive committee, and then we're going to immediately the next week get back then with the building teams at each of the individual buildings, showing that sort of next iteration, next round. This is what we heard you say. What do you think about how this might solve those kinds of issues or ideas? Shortly thereafter, once we have approval to do so, we will be providing documents to Nichols to begin to look at what might the pricing of these options be? And so that will start to happen. We think, probably mid-November, maybe around Thanksgiving, and continue on into December. It's going to take them some time to be able to develop the pricing and those budgets. And we're going to need to work that back and forth a little bit with them as we go along. The goal is we'll have another meeting with you all, with the school board at your December meeting. And the notion then is to be able to share some of those planning options with you at that meeting as well. The ultimate goal is to, in the February timeframe, to finalize things with a final document for the school board. Any questions, discussions?
I'll start. So can
Sure.
you just define the teams for me? Like, what's the executive team? Who is it? What's a building team? What is it comprised of?
Okay, let's start with the building teams. So the building teams are typically the building level administrators, so principal, assistant principal, and then they have selected representatives from within their building to just get a good cross-section from within their building. So those typically, in terms of just numbers, are 6, 7, 8,
Okay.
in that range. The administrative team with the district is
you guys,
these
Dr.
folks, and Dr.
Schuler,
Schuler
Scott Chedister, our director of instruction at the middle school level.
Okay, and then I just lost track of my question. Sorry. I'll just go on to the next question.
Okay.
I can't remember what I was going to follow up with. Oh, you had two meetings with the building teams?
We
so
did,
far?
yeah.
By the time we get to the next board thing, like, what's your objective? How many do you think you're going to have? How many engagements with
the building teams? I think there'll be at least 3.
So the only thing I'm commenting on is, and I know building a school is very different, but we were here, Brad and I were part of that. We were here a lot, right? Does that warrant more engagement? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I guess, yes, I think is the answer to that. But I'll answer it by saying, well, the end of this document shows January. It's not the end of the process. So the goal by January is to have potential solutions, right? A range of potential solutions that then is actually going to lead to a whole nother engagement process, both with building, with community, parents, to really continue to vet this. So it's not, the goal is not by January to have the final plan that we're saying this is what we're going to do. It's really to actually have a launch point for the next kind of round of engagement. So this isn't it. This is it for kind of getting to an initial set of solutions that we can engage and put some feedback around, and then start to explore questions around cost. What does that mean? What is the impact, right? What are tools that we have available to us to support paying for this beyond our budget and fund balance and some existing sources of revenue?
And then I'm reacting to a phrase I heard, which is reconfiguration of spaces. And how does that intersect with curriculum choices or programs? And how does that get resolved or debated, I guess? When? Maybe it's too early still.
Can you maybe be a little more
Yeah,
specific on the
so
question?
we're going to reconfigure a space. A band room change. I'm just making this stuff up, right?
Yep.
A band room change, a science lab, I don't know. But there's an intersection, I perceive, when you're reconfiguring space usage with curricular programs, right? That's got to happen at some point.
That's why Scott Chedister is on that core executive team, because we want to make sure there is a common lens across. If we're designing a science space, we know science is an area that instruction ought to be common and consistent across all of our middle schools, right? So the space required to be able to carry out that instruction, right, most impactfully, we want some common elements to that. So we brought curriculum into the conversation to be able to look at that simultaneously as we're looking at the space itself.
Thank you.
I have a comment, and thank you for the presentation. Very nice. A couple things. One, the 2016 plan, I would personally like to see that again. And two, I have a really hard time moving forward with not having a clear understanding of the financing options. I think I mentioned that pre-meeting. that seems like the biggest basic question. I don't think, where's the financing coming from? Like, coming up with plans that we may not be able to afford or have community support to pursue seems a little premature.
So a couple of things that I hear in that, right? I want to absolutely make sure that the board the board understands the financial options and tools you have available to you. I will say, Angela, just in having approached a lot of different sort of building projects that have ranged from obviously building an entire school like Jefferson that we're sitting in right now to some renovation pieces. I think the work has to happen sort of concurrently, right? So you've got to be able to really tease out and explore options based on what your need, so that when you ultimately apply a financial lens to it, right, you also have some criteria to evaluate that financial lens. So if you approach it only from saying, no matter what, we have $3 million and we're going to design to $3 million, you're going to shortchange the process and the discussion around getting to what is the best solution, or understanding that what that financial reality may mean is that the project is phased, right? So in 2016, we developed a master facility plan. We advanced that plan in one big scope. Community didn't support the plan, but it doesn't mean we've stopped working toward it. Actually, if we didn't have that master plan, when we regrouped, and since that time we've spent probably $60 million in facility improvements, we would have been able to do that in a very thoughtful way without the master plan to guide us toward where we're getting to. So I don't think it works to only go to the financial element and say, right, this is it. I think these two have to happen concurrently so that you can sort of apply those two variables at the same time. So.
Okay, I guess it will be interesting for me to go through the process.
Sure. But what I'm hearing you say, and I understand it, is so even as we're putting some specific costs, the blue section on this timeline, right, to projects, there's a separate discussion to just understand some of those finance mechanics, right? How does money pay for these projects? Because it can potentially happen through multiple streams of revenue that include the $7 million annually that you put toward capital projects, to fund balance opportunities, to some other mechanisms that may allow you access to capital that, and there are a lot of different mechanisms even for how that happens through the operating stream in your budget. So let us begin to build some understanding around that, which may sort of shift or build thinking around sort of opportunities to approach the work. But we'll start that sooner. That's not built into this chart, but Dr. O'Keefe can certainly start to put some of that together. I think we ought to start some of that conversation with the Finance Committee and then kind of elevate it to the full board.
Okay, I think that will be helpful. Just to share, and I think I may be alone in this, my perspective, my personal perspective, is that we don't need fancy to accomplish great things. So I'm in life frugal and approaching this very frugal, and I think my mindset might be different, but I would like to just put that out there.
Well, I disagree. I don't think we're in contrast with each other. I think we want to do the right thing and be pragmatic about it, right? I mean, your statement says we don't think like you.
Well,
that's what you just said, and I disagree with you completely.
Okay.
Yes.
Couple of questions. For the middle school visits, these initial visits, was there, we had this master plan from 6 years ago or so. Was that kind of the foundation, or was it just brainstorming, wide open, what do you need? What were the correct?
Yeah, I think it was definitely was the foundation. If we go back a few slides, or you can flip back in your packets there, some of the needs that were in that plan was really one of the very first things, one of the first conversations we had was, do the guiding principles still apply? these were the needs that were sort of cited as the top 3 priorities in 2016, 2017. Are they still the top 3 priorities? And if not, what are now?
Yeah, and I kind of assume that. I mean, to your question, I don't know how we can talk about financing without doing this part. Because we could say, well, geez, Franklin is, 70 years old? We need to build a new Franklin. How are we going to get that money? So I really think we do need a project, a list. What is the total? And then it seems to me that the result of that, some of that's going to fit into our Sherman Durgis 7.2 funding over the years ahead. Some of it, that bigger ticket items, we might be having to look at other alternatives. So I do think they have to go together. To me, it doesn't make sense to have a budget for an unknown spend.
I hear that. I do. I think it's the timing. Like, this is such a difficult time economically to be creating anything beyond needs. But I do see if you're saying long-term planning, like planning out.
Yeah, and it very, very, very basic level, right? Like even some of the projects that we're talking about here, right? We won't know this for sure until you get kind of final concepts and can talk about phasing, but this is at least 3 years worth of work that wouldn't start at the earliest until potentially like summer 24. So we're not, I get the reality now, we're not planning for construction in the next 12 months. We're actually probably planning for construction that could conceivably start 24 to 48 months, right, from now. So, the reality of sort of like economic conditions and situations is going to obviously impact us throughout, but you got to start the planning right at some point, right, as you're looking at it. And last little piece I just want to say for the benefit of the board, because it's true even with building here where we're sitting at. The design standard in the district has never been fancy, right? Like we have always designed in the district truly toward what gets the job done in terms of providing the experience. And just like one quick parallel example, right? We had to retool the foods lab at Wheaton, Warrenville South. There was no like tweaking or salvaging. We just had to go in, gut, right, and start over. It looks fancy because it's brand new, right? Like it has brand new finishings because you remodeled the space, but I can assure you we've never designed with like sort of every like bell and whistle. We've designed very frugally. I mean, this building certainly came in, $1 million under budget, right, at the end of this because we designed it. Again, it's new. It looks really, really, really nice, but I wouldn't describe this building as fancy. I would just describe it as new, right? So when we go in and we design a science lab, it's going to look new, right? I mean, that's for sure, but just know collectively, right? It's not just saying this directed to you. I'm saying it to everybody. We will always apply what have been sort of the design standards and processes in the district, and what I would describe that as is let's get the job done for a fair and a reasonable cost for our taxpayers and our community, and we're gonna apply those concepts to sort of any notion of this.
Thank you.
Just a few questions on the science labs. Are there no science labs in the middle schools, or
There
are we
are
just
science
updating?
labs, just very, very, very old.
And then on the student wellness for each school, what does that look like in terms of building improvements?
Wellness are your spaces where your health offices, your social work offices, any of your student support services, counseling offices and supports are. I think they're just using the category of wellness to sort of describe that whole sort of suite of student services.
And for Monroe, that was the one that had specifically special education listed as an academic focus. I was wondering if you could elaborate on specifically what that would entail in Monroe.
Sure. If you're familiar with the programs at Monroe, there's if you look at the three schools that we're looking at, Monroe certainly has the most intense special education programs and certainly the most students. Right now, currently, they are sort of scattered around the building in a way that for the, as we understand it anyway, for the types of students that are there, your special education coordinator would like to see them more consolidated, at least some parts of that in one part of the building, because it makes then resourcing needs into those different spaces easier when it's more consolidated. So from a planning standpoint, that's one of the things we're looking at, is that how can we best support those programs. We're not necessarily talking about more spaces today, although we understand that program is actually, there's kids in the pipeline, I guess, in the elementary level that will be there eventually. So I think the size of that program is a conversation I think that's happening at an administrative level that may impact the work, but really just trying to meet and serve the needs for the program that's there. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, our highest needs programs at the middle school are really clustered at Hubble and Monroe, are the two buildings. Hubble, of course, is the newest of our 4 middle schools, and it had some very design spaces specifically for that function. We've had to retrofit at Monroe to kind of build as programs have developed. So I think it's a sort of retooling those spaces that are serving that function.
So for specialists, with our speech paths, OTs, to be able to not have to be running across the entire buildings, they would be more,
Yeah.
it would be.
It's a little bit of it, but it's really just retooling the spaces to make sure they're fitting the function, the student learning function that's taking place inside. I don't want to portray it as it's just a staff convenience that's driving that. It is really about the educational space, fitting. I think every year, if you look even over the last 5 years, right, some of our highest intensity needs programs have changed, right? I mean, we're serving a different student population, right, with a different set of needs that have come in, and that requires us making sure that spaces continue to keep up with students that are getting served.
So do we have somebody from special education giving feedback of what they?
Can I make a comment? This is probably a comment to come later in the process, but just to put it out there now. The idea of consolidating and not spreading out through the school, the special ed population kind of is concerning, because I like that the special ed population would be a part of the school and seen in different various and not just in one spot. I don't think that's exactly what you're talking about. I think you're talking about space and use of space in a particular classroom, but thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
Intentionally wanted to go last. Kind of two sets of comments. First, around some of the language we've used. I would prefer to have the term funding be led before financing. Financing is a part of a funding strategy that we'll go through with the finance committee. There's lots, as Dr. Schuler says, lots of tools available to us. It's just not only financing that's available to us. That's why we developed the master plan, figure out what we can bite off at different times. So start with the idea of how do we fund this as opposed to how do we finance this. Secondly, the term fancy is kind of leaping to a conclusion before we develop the plan.
I want to clarify fancy. Sorry. Because when you said we have science labs, but they're old, I think that's what I mean. It doesn't have to be new. So I don't want to say fancy. It doesn't have to be new and state of the art unless the curriculum drives it, that need.
I'm going to get to that point.
Okay. Thank you. Just want to clarify fancy, because I'm going to be hearing about fancy.
So, you mentioned, going beyond our needs. I would argue that these schools, as that diagram showed, they're designed for a different model of education that our kids are experiencing now and the journey they're going through in their careers, high school and then careers. I think having a master plan that really tackles the academic focus is absolutely essential to the needs of the kids, not just things like HVAC improvements. So what modern learning looks at is that balance between, modern facility planning looks at is that balance between the capital needs as well as the academic focus for the building. So I would argue we're developing this plan because it's all needs. It's all needs for the facilities, it's all needs for the student learning experience as they prepare for the future. So those kind of three things set aside. One thing, I know we went back to the priorities or guiding principles from 2016. I'd like to make sure we double check this and make sure it's in line with Vision 2026, but maybe more importantly, the Portrait of a Graduate. That's kind of the current guidepost we're using as a district for everything we're doing. So I think as we move forward, it's going to be important to index those things back to the new North Star, so to speak. A couple other things. I too, I don't remember who had mentioned it, student wellness. I'm very interested in how the facilities can have an impact on student wellness, not just where the adults are, but how the facility can support a healthy environment, can support connectedness with students, things that we talked about all the time. Modern school planning, especially modern middle schools, takes advantage of some of these opportunities. For example, I think as this process goes through, you're going to see how some of these ideas merge together. When you look at LLC renovations and cafeteria renovations, those are not two independent things. Those are often in modern facility planning connected together because it creates a different experience. And so I think that's what you're going to begin to see, how these individual line items play off of each other, and that's why you develop a master plan that has a focus on academic needs, ties together the capital needs, but also focus on what are we trying to do with our students. So that's kind of some of the things that I think this process will develop. This is just kind of the next step in updating the master plan. We'll take, as Dr. Schuler said, take this out to the community. No design work or funding strategies in place yet. It's trying to get all these ducks in a line, in concert with everything else we're trying to do as a district. So thanks for the update. That's my professional board member input.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I just want to say thank you. I didn't ask any questions or anything, but I was deeply involved in this from the community side in 2017. I just really appreciate the effort, and I also defer to Brad's expertise and really enjoy hearing your opinion on this, and I look forward to the process. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. IASB resolutions. Dr. Schuler?
Yeah. I can help with this. Okay. So last meeting you received a copy of the resolutions. There aren't as many this year. I think only 8 resolutions. I really want to be clear. I don't think the goal tonight is to arrive at specific board position. Ultimately, you will give direction to your delegate on kind of the board's position. I think the goal tonight was just to understand from around the table, are there any where you do not agree with what the resolutions committee is advancing as the proposed adopt or do not adopt? And if so, what are the specific questions that you have that you want for Susan to gather some additional information around? She's got an upcoming opportunity to interact with kind of the team that's put these together and ask some questions in advance of your November meeting where I think you'll finalize those positions. So not necessarily to try to dive too deeply into debate around these tonight as much as just understand where do you have questions and what are those questions so we make sure we can come prepared to the next meeting to answer.
So what we want to do is, if there's anyone that does not agree, those would then come forth to discussion after Susan has gotten some information for us. So.
Well, I think too, if there is information, if there is information,
Yes.
like specific information you want me to get, then I can get that, but,
Yes.
so.
So is there anything, we can go around the table, however we want to do this, that people are disagreeing with what the resolution committee is recommending?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I didn't see anything that I questioned or disagreed with in the intent. There's a few points that I kind of underscored that were kind of reinforced for me that the recommendation was being made. For example, on page 15 under the amended existing positions, the one about, I guess it's the number 5 about school safety fund. I really underlined the district rationale that the inequitable public funding mechanisms in Illinois schools guarantees that some districts will make improvements to safety and security at their local level while others are not. That is so true. I've been to schools across the state. It's not fair the way it is that the wealthy school districts have the resources to make safety improvements and others literally do not have the resources. That one kind of stood out to me. I didn't see anything in here that I disagreed with the recommendation. I didn't know about the Miller ratio. Never heard of that before, but that was informative.
Anybody else have anything?
So speaking of the Miller ratio, I just would be curious why they chose 3.0 instead of the 2.5 that the township is doing. I'm just curious why they moved it to 3 and didn't settle at 2.5.
And just remember too, this is direction for IASB to lobby, basically. So this isn't
Okay,
law. It's just saying, IASB, we're saying we want you to lobby the legislators to try to get this. So it's
Right.
not saying we want 3. We're just saying, let's shoot for 3. You know what I mean? So just so you, I mean, I think that's still a fair question. Don't get me wrong, but I just wanted to just reiterate that I know going into this, the first time I was like, oh, we're making law, and we're not. We're telling them what to lobby for. So, but that is a fair question. But I just wanted to clarify
you.
that.
Anybody have anything else?
Does anybody else? I do. So, and I don't, I don't really need clarifying on this. I just kind of want to say for number 2 and 3, I have the same kind of feedback that I feel like and I totally respect the committee. I mean, I know we do the same kind of work. They're going through all these things, but I just felt like the rationale for both of those was kind of like it's hard and we don't want to do it right now. And I just think like with the alternative fuel school bus, we are moving towards an electric place with automobiles. I talked to my husband about this, who is very into this field of electric cars, and I asked him his opinion on this because he knows a lot more about it and reads a lot about it. And and he said, he goes, I don't, and he does not obviously the oracle of anything, but he's like, I don't know of companies who are working on electric buses right now, but the infrastructure and the legislation and major car companies are moving towards these electric dealerships and electric car models. And I just feel like I understand what the committee is saying, but I just feel like we're on the ground level of putting this legislation in place and making regulations around electric vehicles and things like that. And I just feel like it's a good time to try to get in on that ground floor for funding for school districts for electric vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles. So that was just my thing with that. I don't really need any clarification. It would just be more, if anybody has any comment on that, but I'm not falling on my sword for anything here. And same with firearm dealer location. I've just always had this beef that, I just feel like IASB and school districts should be fighting for anything that can potentially make it a little bit safer in our schools. And I understand the rationale, but I just felt like that can be dealt with. You know what I mean? And I don't know why you would not want to try to create those boundaries farther away from schools. So that was just my statement on that. And then number 6, I didn't really understand the rationale, the resolutions committee analysis. I agree with what the presenting district said, that it should be about legislation and it shouldn't matter who brings it forward. It's about the legislation. I don't care if it's good legislation, it's good legislation, and we shouldn't be worrying about candidates who are usually partisan. School boards are nonpartisan, and I don't know why you wouldn't want to change that focus to the legislation. Who cares who brings it forward? I don't care what party you're from. It's good legislation for education, great. So that was the one I probably had the most disagreement with, but again, none of them I'm not like, so.
Number 6 was the one that I had the most disagreement with too. It didn't make sense not to adopt it, but
yeah. I don't understand that either, so that's it.
But it's changing the position. versus this is
Yep.
already a position.
Yeah.
So it's just changing some language within the position.
Yeah, to pull it away from a candidate to let's not support a candidate, let's support the legislation, you know, and I agree with that from it. If school boards are nonpartisan, things should be nonpartisan. We shouldn't be talking about candidates. So I have been asked like to endorse candidates as a school board member, and I turn it down because it's partisan, and I don't think that's right.
Okay, so if I can summarize this, what I hear both from Susan and Angela is next month, we probably want to talk about 6 a little bit, make
Yeah.
sure that the board comes to clarity around that. There is one piece to get a little clarity on around 1 with the Miller ratio piece, and then maybe a quick check-in on anybody else really had issue around 2 or 3, but Susan
it's
raised
fine.
an issue, so.
Like I said, I'm not gonna.
Okay.
If
So-
no one
so
else does, I'm not
we'll
gonna
really
read it.
focus in on 6, just in the next one. So reread 6 and.
Just my clarity in number 2. I philosophically, I agree with it. What I don't agree with is creating a whole funding mechanism which will get distributed across the state. I think it's a better solution for districts to pilot a program, work with their local legislators to seek funding, not financing, funding. I think that's a better route to kick it off rather than advocate for legislation, which takes potentially resources
Yeah.
away from other parts that are critical needs for our school
Yeah,
districts.
that's fair. Yeah, thanks.
Anything else? Thank you, Susan, for tackling
And
that
that's
for us.
November 3rd. So, yeah, if anything comes up before then, just let me know.
Thank you. Okay, written reports attached to the agenda were the monthly financial reports, FOIA report, board communication log, Citizens Advisory Committee report, board committee reports. The Facilities and Finance Committees met in September. Those were attached. Any other information regarding those that needs to be shared?
I have a
Other-
question, Chris.
Yeah.
Sorry. The CAC report, in the question I asked earlier, or pre-meeting, it would seem more timely that if we could get the CAC minutes quicker than 2 months out from their meeting.
Yeah. So again, happy to work to design that. So just want to be kind of fully clear on what I explained to you, Angela. So when the CAC meets a week from now, because that is a public body in and of itself that's bound to the Open Meetings Act, only that body can officially approve minutes. So once it's approved by CAC, I can certainly share it with the board. It'll save you a couple of weeks on the communication process. Anything else that we share, we can share notes, but they're unofficial minutes. And I just want to make sure that that's
Okay.
really clear, that until the public body has taken the action to approve them at the following meeting, they're not officially approved minutes.
Okay. It seemed a couple times last year that they would have the meeting. I mean, and then that's what happens. They have the meeting. They have to have a meeting a month later to get them approved, and then we might have a meeting a month later. So there's just a lag time of getting them. So maybe some notes in the interim or something, or yeah.
Sure.
I felt like we were getting them after we had already discussed, and it was very after the fact.
We could go back to what we used to do is at the next board meeting, those board members that were in attendance did a kind of a short share. I mean, we can even go to that, but we have to remember those minutes are attached to this, they're public minutes. I mean, I don't know how we would release those without that Citizens Advisory Committee having
Meeting.
approved them to the public.
But
So
could-
we could do something like what we did in the past was board members that were in attendance could do a brief share.
Could the draft minutes just be, I totally understand about them being final and voted on, but could the draft minutes be shared with the board?
Sure.
And
Yeah,
not
that's all I'm saying.
publicly?
So I'm not saying no. I wasn't saying no to. I'm just telling you. I just want to make sure it's very clear what we'd be sharing
Yeah.
with you would be draft minutes that have not been officially approved by that public body. But to the point, once they're done. I mean, the minutes aren't available the day after the meeting. It's once Diana is able to finish drafting the minutes, we can certainly make them available to. I'm not going to offer anything without making sure that Diana's okay.
We love you, Diana. I
Um,
certainly don't want to make any extra work for
Yeah.
Diana. So.
But in fairness, we can share draft. What I hear and I understand, and I heard last year, is there's a desire to shorten that lag between when the conversation happens at CAC and you see what that conversation was about.
Thank you.
Are there other reports from board members?
Monroe, and we approved a donation, so former assistant principal's husband sold his business and donated furniture. They had just got the furniture the day I was there, so we got to enjoy a new to them conference room table and chairs. And, my wife used to be an aide there in the special ed room, so I wanted to make sure to get to see some of her former coworkers, and Mr. Buck and Mr. Crespo were very proud to talk about the integration of those special ed students into the student population and how they are really accepted and adopted's not the right word, but integrated with the school population. So, so I don't think they would be for, and I know you weren't saying that, but putting them in the corner and leaving them there. So, so that was good. I'm going to get to Sandburg this week, and Jefferson's one of my schools, and I hope to get that scheduled soon.
Anybody else?
I had a chance to go to my last adopted school of Hubble a few weeks ago and had a really great visit there. Had a tour of the building that was interesting with our building conversation this week of seeing how that building was designed for middle school and how that sort of enabled that education. So that was interesting. I'm not a visual person, so being able to be in that building and sort of see that in action was helpful. And then just a little fun story is I love that the principal played football in the lunchroom with the kids. And that was something I told mine, and they couldn't wait to get to Hubble because of that. So kudos to him for being creative.
Anybody else?
I just have been to Hawthorne and Emerson. I'm still, and actually all my adopted schools, I've been to all of them, but I have actually not met and done the tour. I've gone to volunteer, and I've been very good with the paper cutter and the math manipulative at Emerson and Hawthorne. So, but I am happy to do it, and so I will get there and set up. Actually, I was supposed to go to Hawthorne today for the football day, but it got moved to next week, so we'll do that next week and enjoy that. So.
Anything else?
I was at Edison this week. The energy in that school is amazing. Did I say Emerson or Edison? Edison. I said the right one. Okay. I was at Edison this week. Yeah, the energy is fantastic. I bet I was in at least 10 classrooms, for 5 minutes here and there, and just watching coaches work, watching teachers work. Saw fast-paced classes. Saw standard classes. Saw the IM classes. It was amazing across many different disciplines, so it's just great. Really appreciated that. Appreciate the school opening up and making time for us.
Anything else? Okay. Topics for future discussion, the 2022 tax levy. Does anybody else have anything else that they would like to add for future discussion?
Just a couple comments within that tax levy. I was reading a couple articles today about the challenges that school districts are going to be facing going into the season. So when we have that presentation, a couple things, and I think I've referred to this in previous meetings, a couple things I want to make sure become clear, that we message to the board and to the community. I want to make sure we highlight some of the financial costs we're incurring that we have to absorb within our operating budget that may be way exceeding because of inflation and because of other issues, a normal 5% levy, but also kind of highlight how the drop in debt service levy for this year might create a different, there's a total cost to taxpayers of the levy, whatever the levy amount is for the operating budget, how that plays off against the drop in the debt service levy, what's the net impact on taxpayers. I think that's going to be an important thing to make sure that we're clear on.
That must have been some good reading.
It was very exciting. Very exciting.
Man.
Anything else any board members want to have on a future discussion? Okay, next regular meeting is November 9th, 2022 at Longfellow. October 26th, Committee of the Whole at the SSC. I move to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Illinois Open Meetings Act, Exemption 5 ILCS 120/2, subparagraph C, subparagraph 2. May I have a second?
Second.
Who was
Nate.
that? Mr. Long. Ms. Hutchinson, will you please call the roll on that? Yes.
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 There is no action expected following the closed session.